I have started and stopped this video too many times to count. I am in my feelings, as they say, and I can't get more than a couple minutes in without either going off on some tangent or becoming pretty emotional. But I'm going to give it one more try. Welcome. I'm Peggy Oliveira. Thank you for joining me. I want to start by saying if you are in a place where you are looking for something that is feeling hopeful, positive, inspirational, or even educational, then this video, at least at this moment, is probably not a great video to watch because there is nothing in what I'm feeling that is particularly hopeful or positive. But I want to share it with you for in part because it's what is present and real for me right now. But I also know that there's a lot that's happening, and the energy that it creates around us and then therefore within us is difficult. And it feels in some ways like society is trying to gaslight us all. um, so a couple of days ago, I was having a conversation with a friend and we were talking about things that are going on, and I was sharing with her how much rage I feel at times and how that's showing up in my life. And she said, it's kind of weird because you're the person that I know that looks at kind of all sides and can understand different perspectives and has so much empathy around that. But you have a lot more rage than I do. Why do you think that is? And my immediate response to her was, I don't know. And then immediately after that, I said, probably because in doing this work with survivors for 25 years, I am just fed up, beyond fed up with people rationalizing, excusing, being okay with standing by people that behave in ways that are deplorable. Um, that people think that a rapist should be in a position of power at all. It infuriates me, honestly. Um, and as I said at the very beginning, I'm going to try to not go off on tangents here and keep my train of thought. But the truth is, I really have been feeling a lot in the last year, especially. Um, there's some different kinds of just stress that are happening in my current life, nothing particularly really bad. But thinking about that idea of vulnerability, right? So the fact that he was elected again, just sometimes I feel numb and other times I feel rage. there's there's not a lot of medium ground there about that in particular. Um, and just with so many different despicable things going on, I am feeling a lot of rage. And and I have to keep reminding myself because that rage is showing up sometimes. I'm not acting on it, but I'm thinking and feeling a lot about it. And I end up feeling bad about that. And I have to remind myself that the rage is because it matters. Damn it. um, and that it's okay to feel rage sometimes. It doesn't feel good when you're experiencing it, but there's a purpose sometimes. So we kind of talked it through a little bit, and I feel a lot of rage about a lot of what is happening. And the idea that just 25 years of being with people when they share their stories, sometimes for the first time, when they share how they were not believed or where they were too afraid to share because they didn't think they'd be believed or they would be blamed, and seeing how that does actually happen in reality the majority of the time. So lately, in particular, there's been a lot more kind of making the rounds around the Epstein files. And this video isn't specifically about that, but the reality of what that means and the conversation around it. And I have found myself continuing to feel agitated about that. And in part because of how some people are speaking about it. And then I feel a lot of internal conflict because, and I know this may be hard to understand, and some people may have a feeling about me in regards to how I feel about this, but I've kind of had to work through it, and I have actually spoken with some colleagues around it as well, and they feel similarly. So I know I'm not the only one. But on one hand, I feel incredibly grateful and even a bit hopeful about the fact that there are so many people who believe the people that have come forward about him and what he's done and the other people involved, that they've been believed. Not everybody believes them, but reasonable people do. um, that people are fighting for them to get justice. I do feel hopeful about that, and I am so glad and grateful that that has happened. And then there's this other part of me, the part that has been working with so many people over the years who will never see that justice, who were shamed and belittled and blamed. And that hurts. That breaks my heart. And not just my clients, but I know that is your reality for so many of you as well. And you likely will never see justice. And so I'm glad, and I'm also angry that all these other people are not only not going to see justice, but don't have people standing up for them. Congress people aren't, even from their own hometowns, are not advocating and fighting for them. And that makes me angry because it hurts. So, so I feel that internal conflict, and I have felt bad about that at times. Talking with my colleagues has helped, um, which is part of the reason why it's important to be able to talk openly about how we're feeling, right? So I have that going on, and that is difficult and that's frustrating at times. And then on that same day that I had the conversation with my friend, later in the day is when a lot of those emails came out. And there's so much conversation on kind of both sides, so to speak, right now. People deflecting and rationalizing and blaming other people for it and all kinds of stuff. And then there are people who are continuing to stand up and say, we need this and we need to hold people accountable and all of that. And so lots of conversations happening around it. And there's two things, and I'm going to try to keep this somewhat brief, because this is one of the tangents that I've gone off in other takes. One of the things that I'm hearing quite a bit now, for some reason, I don't know, maybe it's just the way my algorithm is working, but I'm hearing a lot of people talk about the biggest sex trafficking ring in history or in the US. Um, and while there's no data there, we don't have actual data in terms of that. I don't think, regardless, I mean, there's some around trafficking and that sort of thing. But when I hear people say the biggest one, first I just kind of question, like, where are they getting that information from? And the reality is, I think people are saying that because it's the one they know of. It's the one that all kinds of people are talking about, even internationally. So it seems like it's got to be the biggest one. But the reality is, the biggest one might have happened in your own community. The biggest one might have happened down the road. Biggest one might have happened at your church. Because sex trafficking rings for children exists everywhere. And on one hand, I can't blame the general population for not understanding that. And at the same time, both things can be true. I feel angry that people don't know that. And I have to remind myself, I don't judge them for that. Because for that circumstance, I am able to remind myself that not everybody has worked with survivors of 25 years, and has literally heard the stories and experiences from more than a couple handfuls of people who have lived through sex trafficking rings, big ones. People weren't celebrities. They weren't necessarily billionaires. They weren't wealthy, or they weren't celebrity or well known or whatever in terms of national or international recognition. But they exist. They probably existed from the beginning of time, and they exist right now. And so I'm frustrated because how how do people not know this? And I know even survivors don't know this. If they haven't experienced, how would they? And I don't expect that to be the case, but have known and sat with people as they have shared their horrific stories. I know that they have existed. I know that some of them are huge. I know that they include people within communities that are looked up to, who would never think and would not believe that those people were engaged in what they were doing, that the survivor would not have been believed. And that infuriates me. So there's a lot of different things. I mean, a lot of things that are happening right now are really infuriating to me. But when it comes to this particular issue, there is a lot. And that is one of the things that I personally am kind of finding myself grappling with, in a sense, kind of like trying to navigate, because I am grateful that people are talking about it. I'm grateful that people are understanding it. And I'm just thinking, I guess I should probably share a video in which I talk about the reality of that. But that is present. And then in seeing the other side, things that they're saying, deflecting and rationalizing and that sort of thing, it just really makes me so incredibly angry. And how he continues to get away with deflecting and blaming, that creates rage. And then there was one thing in particular that I really just wanted to bring attention to. And for most of you, you're going to likely know this, but it might also be a reminder that you need to hear. So again, there's lots of commentary on what is kind of coming out and forward and that sort of thing. Um, and there's a good chance if you are watching the news or following any social media or anything, you've likely heard about Megyn Kelly making some comments after some of these emails came out. If you're not sure who I'm talking about, she is, I think she has her own like political show maybe or something, or podcast. She's been around for quite a long time, and she is a supporter of this regime. But she made some really stupid comments. Um, and there's a lot in it that made me angry. But there's one thing in particular that I think could very easily get lost here. So I'm going to just kind of briefly kind of share some of what she shared or what she said. So she's saying that basically she knows somebody who was kind of close to him, Epstein, and that person shared some stuff with her. And she said, this person has told me from the start, years and years ago, that Jeffrey Epstein, in this person's view, was not a pedophile. So years and years ago, I don't know what that means exactly, but anyway, this person was there for all of this. This person knew what was happening. But that he, meaning Jeffrey Epstein, he was into the barely legal type. So barely legal generally would mean 17, 18 years old, because under that is not legal, particularly for an adult. She goes on to say, like, he liked 15-year-old girls. And I realize this is disgusting. I'm definitely not trying to make an excuse for it. I'm just giving you facts that he wasn't into like 8-year-olds. There's stuff I want to say about that too, but let me continue. He wasn't like into 8-year-olds, but he liked the very young teen types that could pass for even younger than they were, but would look legal to a passerby. So I'm actually a little confused by that, because to me that seems the opposite. They could pass for even younger than they were, but would look legal to a passerby. So again, there's a lot here that I could go into. But one of the things that came to mind that I think, even thinking specifically about his victims and his association and the victims and the people that have come forward, when she's talking about 15-year-old girls, who, by the way, are not legal, they are children. And whether 8 or 15 or 5 or whatever, it's still child sexual assault or abuse. Full stop. That's the reality. But also a reality is that, generally speaking, people who are 15-year-olds finding themselves for the first time in that type of situation where they are lured in, abducted in, whatever the case may be, if they are brought into a circumstance as a teen, I'm hesitating because I feel like I can say incredibly confidently, I'm not going to say with absolute certainty, but generally speaking, I can almost guarantee that even somebody who is brought into that as a teenager has likely experienced something similar, or in terms of impact on sense of self, kind of equally as bad. they have likely experienced that long before 15 years old, potentially at 8 or 5 or even younger. And there's a good chance that they experienced it throughout. And so when I read this, like really, there were many things that stood out to me. But that really stood out to me in terms of impact on people hearing it and then what they believe as a result of that. And a survivor, what they take in terms of it being a reinforcement to minimize their own experience or to potentially blame themselves for it happening and for the way that they've been impacted by it. And recognizing the reality that it's not the first time, that this is an ongoing thing. It may be new people, but it's not likely the first time they've ever experienced something. And I can say that in part because of my actual professional experience and working with the people that I have that have ended up a part of something like this. With almost all of them, first it started before 15 for sure. And I can say that I'm almost 100% sure right now that all of them were much younger than that. Um, but I feel really confident in also saying that they were also all abused much earlier than teen years and also by more than one person. So the trafficking wasn't their only abuse experience, that there was other abuse that they were experiencing as well, sometimes individually by somebody involved in that. But it wasn't solely in that regard. I'm not sure if that makes sense or not. But that is the reality. And to have somebody in a position, I don't know how many people follow her, but it's a lot. She was on Fox for quite a long time. She's had her own show at different times, and she's still out there spreading all kinds of ignorance. But there's a lot of people that follow her, a lot of survivors that follow her, a lot of people that craft their beliefs or their beliefs are reinforced by things that people like her say. And, it's interesting that she says he liked 15-year-old girls. And I realize this is disgusting. I'm definitely not trying to make an excuse for it. Just giving you facts that he wasn't like into 8-year-olds. Now, I know that it can be easy to think of a 15-year-old and an 8-year-old as very different, and developmentally they are. But I've said this many times before. Being assaulted at 15 is deeply, deeply impactful, even if it is your first time. It is deeply impactful. Even if it is the only time, it happened one time. And to suggest, whether she's intentionally suggesting or not, that somehow being a teenager makes it less bad, it's infuriating. And I know I'm kind of laughing, but honestly, as I've tried to get through this video with all the other takes, if I don't laugh, I end up crying much of the time or going off on a tangent. So, I'm not entirely sure if this video is even going to be seen by that many people. If you're still here watching, I appreciate you being here. Truly, I really appreciate you being here. And I know that they're part of how people cope sometimes, and I have done it. Like I said, I'm sometimes numb. I think I said that in this video. um, it is natural and sometimes even healthy to want to check out. Um, so if you're still here watching, I appreciate you being with me in this. I appreciate you witnessing my feelings and my thoughts as I've shared today. And while right now I'm not feeling particularly hopeful, I do trust that the majority of people are not okay with this. And I am grateful that while other stories matter just as much, that there are people who are hearing these stories and speaking about them. So, because of that, because more people are speaking about it, I am hopeful that we will get to a point at some point, hopefully, in the not too distant future, um, that more people will recognize that perpetrators, no matter who they have perpetrated against, whether they're well known or not, should be held accountable. Because every survivor deserves that. Whether nobody in your community knows who that person is or everybody in the world knows who that person is, everybody deserves justice, and everybody's story matters. I'd love for you to connect in the comments, whatever came up for you. Thank you so much for being here and being a part of this supportive community to me and to everybody else. I'll look forward to seeing you next time.